So good morning students. So today we will discuss regarding the treatment of non-hemorrhagic stroke or the ischemic stroke. So first of all the categories of treatment. So in the today's class, silent please. So in today's class we will discuss regarding the management of ischemic stroke or the non-hemorrhagic stroke. So these are the treatments which are designed to reverse or lessen the amount of tissue infarction and improve the clinical outcomes. So there are different groups of treatment and they have been grouped into: first is the medical support, second is IV thrombolysis, third is endovascular techniques, fourth is anti-thrombotic treatment, fifth is neuroprotection, and sixth is rehabilitation. So we will learn the one by one. So first is the medical support. So when a patient comes to you with the ischemic stroke or the non-hemorrhagic stroke, our immediate goal is to optimize the cerebral perfusion in the surrounding ischemic penumbra. We are all aware that the area surrounding the infarcted part is known as the penumbra, and our immediate goal is to optimize the cerebral perfusion in this surrounding part. And the attention is also directed toward preventing the common complications of bedridden patients, because usually these are the patients who are bedridden, and our focus is also towards prevention of these common complications like the infection or the deep venous thrombosis, that is DVT. If the person is having the high blood pressure, the blood pressure is lowered, and apart from the high blood pressure there are certain other conditions in which we have to reduce the blood pressure. So the blood pressure is lowered in the malignant hypertension if the person is suffering from concomitant myocardial ischemia and the blood pressure is more than 185 or 110 millimeter mercury and thrombolytic therapy is anticipated. So in this condition we have to reduce the blood pressure. There are various antihypertensive drugs which can reduce the blood pressure, and the most preferred agent is the esmolol. Esmolol is a short-acting beta-1 blocker which can be a first step to decrease the cardiac work and maintain the blood pressure. If the person is suffering from fever, it should be treated with the antipyretics and the surface Clusin. And we have to carefully monitor for the serum glucose, because we have to cap serum glucose to a normal level. The person neither should have a hypoglycemia or hypoglycemia. So in broad we have to maintain the blood glucose between 100 to 150, not less than 100 and not more than 150. So we have to check for the blood sugar level of the patient. If the person is having cerebral edema, so there are the various drugs which are used for the cerebral edema. So these are the drugs like in the form of water retention or the IV mannitol. So by the use of water restriction and IV mannitol, we can reduce the cerebral edema, because cerebral edema is a fearsome complication of the ischemic stroke which can cause the brain herniation, and the brain herniation due to cerebral edema, it peaks on second or third day, but it can cause mass effect for the 10 days. And we have to carefully look for the hypovolemia also, because these are the patients who are more prone to hypovolemia, and this hypovolemia can cause hypotension and worsening of the infarction, because the ischemic penumbra requires a careful perfusion, and for the careful perfusion we require a normotensive person. So we have to carefully look for the hypovolemia. If the person is having hypovolemia, then we have to give him the IV fluids. If the person is having a large infarct, suppose the patient is having a large infarct, in that condition the person is having the more chances of developing cerebral edema. In that scenario we can go for hemicranectomy. What is hemicranectomy? It is the craniotomy with temporary removal of the part of the skull. In different meta-analysis it has been seen when the person is having large infarction, if we do a hemicranectomy, it reduces the mortality rate. So in selected patient the hemicranectomy may be required. There are certain conditions which should alert the physician, like cerebellar infarction. It may mimic the labyrinthitis because of prominent vertigo and vomiting. Suppose one patient comes to you with the marked nausea and vomiting. These both nausea and vomiting can be seen in the labyrinthitis, or they can also be seen in the conditions of cerebellar stroke. So the careful attention to the patient is very important to reach a correct diagnosis. If the person is having headache or the neck ache, it can mimic the cerebellar stroke from the vertebral artery dissection. And this increase in intracranial pressure, it may lead to brainstem compression and can cause the respiratory arrest. So, prophylactic suboccipital decompression of the large cerebral infarct before the brainstem compression. So, this is very carefully need to be adhered to. So, medical support in a patient of non-hemorrhagic stroke is very important. After the medical support, you have managed the managed the ABC of the patient. You have given a first aid to the patient. Then comes the role of IV thrombolysis. And IV thrombolysis is given through the is used through the RTPA, that is recombinant tissue fibrinogen plasminogen activator. So RTPA is used for the IV thrombolysis. But there is also drawback with the use of RTPA, because with the use of RTPA there are more chances of developing intracerebral hemorrhage, and there is a window period, and this window period is up to 3 hours. So treatment with IV RTPA is usually done within 3 hours of the onset of ischemic stroke. If we use the RTPA after the 3 hours of onset of stroke, it has been seen it is not much helpful. So maximum to maximum we can go for IV RTPA up to 4.5 hours. So the time interval for giving the IV RTPA is up to 4.5 hours, and useful results are seen when the IV RTPA is used within 3 hours of the onset of stroke. And how the time of the stroke onset is calculated. So the time of the stroke onset is calculated the time the patient's symptoms started, or the time the patient was last seen as normal. So the time taken is when the patient symptoms started, or the patient was seen as normal last time. From that time, the time period is calculated to given the IV RTPA. And the patients who awaken with a stroke have the onset defined as the time they went to bed. So the time of stroke onset is very important, because by the time of the stroke onset we can judge whether the patient is eligible to give the IV thrombolysis or not. And there are certain indications or contraindications attached to the IV thrombolysis. And what are the indications? First, the patient should have a clinical diagnosis of stroke. So the first indication, the person should be suffering from a stroke. And the second, that the onset of symptoms to the time of drug administration is less than 3 hours, because only the useful results are seen when the IV thrombolysis is given within 3 hours of the stroke onset. And CT stain will not show hemorrhage or edema greater than 1/3 of the MCA territory. The person's CT stain should not have any hemorrhage, and the cerebral edema should not be greater than 1/3 of the MCA territory. The person's age is 18 years or more than 18 years, and the consent is given by the patient or the surrogate. So these are the indications of giving the IV thrombolysis. Apart from these indications, there are certain contraindications which should be kept in mind while giving the IV thrombolysis. So first is the sustained blood pressure more than 185 or 110 millimeter mercury despite the therapy. Suppose the patient is having the blood pressure of more than 185 or 110, but after the treatment the blood pressure comes to the normal. In this scenario, the IV thrombolysis can be given, but the blood pressure is remain more than 185 or 110 despite the therapy. In this scenario, the IV thrombolysis cannot be given. Other contraindications are platelets less than 1 lakh, hematocrit less than 25%, sugar less than 50 or greater than 400. The person is used heparin within 48 hours, and prolonged APTT or elevated INR, GI bleeding preceding 21 days. The person is rapidly improving, and the person is having the minor stroke symptoms, prior stroke or head injury within 3 months, recent myocardial infarction, major surgery in preceding 14 days, or the person is having coma or stupor. So these are the points which should be kept in mind, because if any of the criteria is present in that scenario, we cannot go through IV thrombolysis. So these are the indications or contraindications for the IV thrombolysis. And how we'll use the RTPA? And the RTPA is given intravenously through 2 peripheral lines. And why these two peripheral lines are used? Because only one line is used for giving the RTPA, and another line is used for giving any other drugs. No single line should be used for giving RTPA and other drugs. The line through which RTPA is given should be used separately from the other drugs. And what is the dose of RTPA? That is 0.9 milligram per kilogram, and the maximum dose is 90 milligram. Suppose you have calculated the maximum dose of the RTPA. Here the 10% of the dose is given as bolus, and remainder of the dose is given in over 1 hour. So there is a bolus dose followed by a maintenance dose. And what should be checked? The frequent blood pressure monitoring should be done, because after RTPA there are chances of hypotension or hypertension. So frequent BP monitoring should be done, and no other antithrombotic treatment should be given in 24 hours. When you started the RTPA, no other antithrombotic treatment should be given in the first 24 hours. And avoid urethral catheterization for 2 hours after giving the RTPA. Suppose you have started with the RTPA, and after starting the RTPA, the person's neurological status is declined, or the person develops uncontrolled blood pressure. In that scenario, stop the infusion and give the cryoprecipitate. Why the infusion is stopped? Because if the person's neurological status is declining, or the person is developing uncontrolled blood pressure, it means the person is developing intracerebral hemorrhage due to use of RTPA. In that condition, stop the infusion, give the cryoprecipitate, and do a NCCT stain of the brain urgently. So these are the conditions in which we can give the RTPA, and these are the indications and contraindications. After the IV thrombolysis comes the role of endovascular techniques. So there are various endovascular techniques, and there are certain vessels which are useful for endovascular techniques, because there are certain vessels which involves a large clot volume and often fail to open with IV RTPA alone, like middle cerebral artery, internal carotid artery, and basilar artery. So these are the vessels which usually have a large clot volume, and even after giving the IV RTPA, they usually does not open completely. So in that condition, we can go for endovascular techniques. So first endovascular technique is endovascular mechanical thrombectomy, where we remove the thrombus through the endovascular techniques. So it is the adjunctive treatment of acute stroke patients who are ineligible for or have contraindications to thrombolytics, or those who have failed to have vascular recanalization with IV thrombolytics. So there are three indications of doing the endovascular mechanical thrombectomy. First, the patient is ineligible for IV thrombolysis. The person is having contraindication to the IV thrombolysis. And third, after giving the IV thrombolysis, the person's vessel does not open fully. In that condition, we can go for endovascular technique, and one technique is endovascular mechanical thrombectomy. Another endovascular technique is the MERCI, that is MERCI, and the full form of MERCI is mechanical embolus retrieval in cerebral ischemia. So we are removing the embolus mechanically. So this is a newer technique, MERCI, which is a novel endovascular thrombectomy device which restores the patency of the occluded vessel within 8 hours of ischemic stroke symptoms with successful recanalization at 90 days. So this is a endovascular technique, that is MERCI. After the endovascular technique comes the role of antithrombotic treatment. In antithrombotic treatment, we have got two choices. First is the antiplatelet treatment, that is known as platelet inhibition, and second is anticoagulation. So platelet inhibition is done through use of antiplatelets. There are different antiplatelets available in the market. First is the aspirin. Silence please. So first antiplatelet is the aspirin. Aspirin is the most widely used antiplatelet agent, and it has been proven to be effective for the acute treatment of ischemic stroke. And the use of aspirin within 48 hours of stroke onset reduces both the stroke recurrence risk and mortality. So aspirin is a wonderful drug for the treatment of stroke. Another antiplatelet drug is the efzimfotase. Efzimfotase is a glycoprotein 2B3A receptor inhibitor which was found to cause excess intracranial hemorrhage and should be avoided in the acute stroke. So efzimumab should be avoided in the acute stroke. Another drug in the clopidogrel, which is still being tested to prevent the stroke following the TIA and minor ischemic stroke. So the most commonly used drug is the aspirin, which is used in the acute treatment of the stroke as well as for the prevention part. After the platelet inhibition comes the role of anticoagulation. In anticoagulation, it is done through the low molecular weight heparin. This low molecular weight heparin fails to show any benefit over aspirin and shows the increased bleeding rates. So the anticoagulation is usually not preferred because it shows more bleeding chances and does not show any benefit over the aspirin. And the last part is the neuroprotection. The neuroprotection, it is the concept of providing a treatment that prolongs the brain tolerance to the ischemia. And the neuroprotection includes the use of drugs which block the excitatory amino acid pathways, protecting the neurons and the glias. And second neuroprotection is through the hypothermia. And it has been seen when we use hypothermia, it is neuroprotective in persons having the cardiac arrest. So the neuroprotection can be provided through the different drugs. Then the rehabilitation. In the rehabilitation, the patient is treated in the comprehensive stroke unit and done through rehabilitation. And it has been seen when the person is done through the rehabilitation, it improves the neurological outcomes and it reduces the mortality. And the proper rehabilitation of the stroke patient includes the early physical, occupational and the speech therapy. So the person should be having early physical therapy, occupational therapy and the speech therapy. And our goal of rehabilitation is to return the patient home and to maximize the recovery by providing a safe, progressive regime suited to the individual patient. So our ultimate goal to make the patient symptom free and to patient can be managed at home freely. In the rehabilitation, one is the re-strength therapy. In re-strength therapy, we immobilize the unaffected part to improve the hemiparesis following the stroke. So this is a one important component of the rehabilitation. After the treatment, there comes the role of prevention part and the primary and secondary prevention of the stroke and TIA. And the general principles, we should identify and control the modifiable risk factors and which can reduce the burden of the stroke. And what are the risk factors? The risk factors can be in the form of older age, family history of stroke, hypertension, tobacco smoking, abnormally blood cholesterol, that is dyslipidemia, prior stroke or TIA, cardiac conditions, oral contraceptives and hormone replacement therapy, hypercoagulable states and diabetes. So these are the various risk factors, and through the modification of these risk factors we can reduce the burden of the stroke and TIA in the society. And to the prevention part, there are some 10 drugs are also, and these drugs are known as the antiplatelet agents, which inhibits the formation of intra-arterial platelet aggregates. And the commonly used drugs are the aspirin. The aspirin, it acetylates platelet cyclooxygenase, which irreversibly inhibits the formation of thrombosin A2 in the platelets. And this thrombosin A2 is a platelet aggregating and vasoconstricting prostaglandin. So by the use of aspirin, we are reducing the formation of thrombosin A2. And it also inhibits the formation of prostacyclin. And the dose of aspirin is around 50 to 325 mg per day for the stroke prevention. Another drug is the clopidogrel. The clopidogrel blocks the ADP receptor on the platelets and prevents the cascade, resulting in the activation of glycoprotein 2B3A that leads to the fibrinogen binding to the platelet and platelet activation. And clopidogrel can cause thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura but does not cause neutropenia. So this is the another drug apart from aspirin, that is clopidogrel. Another drug is the dipyridamole. This dipyridamole is also an antiplatelet drug which inhibits the uptake of adenosine by a variety of cells that leads to the accumulation of adenosine, and this adenosine is a inhibitory platelet inhibition, and it potentiates the effect of prostacyclin and the nitrous oxide. Another antiplatelet drug is the ticlopidine. It is a rarely used drug which is alternative to clopidogrel. It has got the same mechanism of action as clopidogrel, It is more effective than aspirin but causes more side effects in the form of diarrhea, neutropenia and TTP. Due to these side effects, the ticlopidine is rarely used. So the most commonly used drug is the aspirin for the prevention of the stroke and TIA. Then there is a role of anticoagulation therapy. This anticoagulation, it is safe for the patients with chronic non-rheumatic atrial fibrillation and to prevent the cerebral embolism. And the decision to use anticoagulation for the primary prevention, it is based on the risk factors. And if the person is having history of TIA or stroke, it favors anticoagulation. Anticoagulation, it also reduces the risk of embolism in the acute MI. And the 3-month course of anticoagulation is given when there is a Q-wave infarction, substantial left ventricular dysfunction, congestive heart failure, mural thrombosis or atrial fibrillation. In these conditions, we can go through anticoagulation with the use of low